This chapter is chapter 4, and basically this chapter teaches us how learning takes place. And as children learn, they add to the information that they did have, and that's what we call constructing knowledge, or it's from the constructivist viewpoint, and that goes back to Vygotsky. I told you all we're going to be hearing about several different people back and forth all throughout this class, and so constructivist is building your knowledge or adding to the information. Now the way we add to that information is the way our brain is put together. And in this chapter it talks a lot about how our brain functions, how it works, and I just want to talk about a few of the simple little different things that are included in your outline for chapter 4. You have neurons. Basically, these are what we call the building blocks of our brain. And you're born with billions of these. But over time, some of them are either taken away because we don't use them, our brain just removes them, or if with some children that come to us that have been through abusive situations or have been neglected, their brains, those neurons in their brains have been hurt, and so they don't have those neurons any longer. Now, once you lose a neuron, you cannot replace it. It's gone forever. But one of the most important things I want you to learn in this class is the brain is an amazing thing. Once a neuron is lost, these synapses and the dendrites that are around that will grow back around and connect in different ways, but we'll never get that one neuron back. But the brain is able to repair areas, but not to get those areas completely back. They'll grow around and make new connections, but that area is going to be lost forever. So that's why it's so important that we never, ever abuse or neglect a child, because it does affect their brain and their brain development. Now, when it comes to brain development, children grow in different ways, and that's their stimulation. We have to stimulate the children. That's why we want to do as many things as we can during those that first year to increase the children's senses in learning. They all learn through their senses, and as they get older, then they add to the information they have already built on. And basically, when boys and girls grow, there's not a lot of difference in the way their brain grows, but the information they take in is a little bit different. Boys tend to be more hands-on, where girls tend to be more language oriented, but that they're pulling in information in different ways. And this leads us to basically talk about perception, which is our 5 senses. It's important to make sure that children environments include the 5 different senses so that we can help every child learn to the best of their ability. Now, it also talks about in our chapter giving those children attention. Attention is very important. Children need attention. They need positive attention in the classroom. And if they don't receive positive attention, they're going to do things in a negative way to get attention, and we don't want that to happen in our classroom. Now, you also have children who have developmental disabilities or special education needs, and those children may have ADD or ADHD, it talks about in the chapter, and those children cannot help. Their minds require them to seek attention, and so we have to work with them. Sometimes they're a little bit hyperactive, different things, but we work with them and able to understand that they need more of that than some of the other children do. Children also learn through what we call verbal and nonverbal skills. A lot of kids can listen directions and follow those directions. Other children really look at your face and your facial expressions. Instead of the words we're using, they look at our face and our bodies and how we're reacting. And sometimes if we're not being truthful, our body will give us away. And so our body signals do. So making sure that our body and our verbal language goes together is very important. And this brings us back to Piaget. Children learn how to manipulate objects very early on. They also learn how to manipulate people very early on. And so they a lot of times will understand if what you're saying and your facial expressions don't match up, they pick up on that very quickly. So being very careful about making sure that what we say and what we do both go together. Now, as children learn, their memory increases. And there's different types of memory that it talks about in your chapter. And basically, they talk about several different kinds. There's recall, recognition, impaired associates. Now, I'm not going to ask really a lot of information on this section, but I do want you to know that memory is something that comes with repetition. Children learn by repetition. They have to do things over and over and over. And the more they do, the more they remember. And it says in your book, it says around 5 years of age, children have some ideas about their own methods of memorizing. But it's not until about 8 that children begin to understand how memory works. And so repetition is very important. They're not really trying to remember, they just remember early on because we repeat things over and over for them. Now, as children learn, we also have to think about their behavior. Children's behavior affects everybody around them. And there's several different types of behavior that are talked about in this chapter, and 2 of the different viewpoints are spoken about right here is called classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is learning takes place through the association of a stimulus and response. Something's going to happen and the children are going to respond. Operant conditioning is behavior is shaped by careful use of reinforcements. That's when we teach children how they're supposed to behave in different situations. It's shaped by us constantly explaining, like when we're at church, we behave differently than when we are, say, out at the park. At church, we're more reverent, we're quieter. We know when to stand up or when to sit down. When we're at the park, it's a free-for-all. You can do anything you want to. You just have to be careful. There's safety issues we have to follow. And so classical conditioning is learning the response to something that's already happened. In operant conditioning is learning about how we behave in different social situations through reinforcement of that behavior. Okay? It's spoken about in the chapter. Now, something else it talks about in this chapter is a little bit later on. It talks about as children learn, they learn how to, if they're praised, they're going to do things more. Okay, that goes back to your classical and operant conditioning. If you praise someone, they're going to do it again. If you don't, they're not going to. So that's your classical, operant, and classic conditioning. So read through those sections and try to make sense of that. Something else I want you to be aware of in your chapter is where it talks about when children learn, because this goes back to Piaget. As children learn, there's 3 different words I want you to clue in on to. One's assimilation, accommodation, and equilibrium. As a child learns about what something is, they assimilate that information. So if they see something that's red, it's big, it's round, they ask what it is, it's a ball. Okay, then the next time they see something that's big and round, they say, oh, that's a ball. But no, that's not a ball, that's a balloon. And so they make an accommodation in their mind that what they have learned is a little bit different than what they had previously learned. But it's 2 different objects. Okay, the ability to do this or tell a difference between assimilation and accommodation is equilibrium. When they can make sense out of their world by the information they have learned previous and apply it to what they have learned as of today. And that's what the balloon and ball information, that's on page 50 in your textbook. As children also grow, they learn through social development, and that goes back to Vygotsky. Vygotsky is in Piaget. I also talk about social behaviors in our chapter. And with social behaviors, children learn what they should and should not do, which also connects back to your operant and classical conditioning. So everything's a little bit connected. Also, another person in this chapter that to pay attention to is Howard Gardner on page 52. And he has developed different stages of learning, or different learning styles. And everybody's good at something, but everybody is also not as good as some people and others. But we all have some things that we're good at doing, and we want to really stress those with the children in our classrooms. And as children learn, it's very, very important to make sure that we are helping them along the way, that we are setting the environment up so that they can learn in the environment, where it's not just the same thing every day, that there's different things in their environments for them to learn from. As the children learn in our preschool or infant toddler environments, we're setting those up. TV is really not a part of that. Television is something they get a lot of in a home. We want them working together, interacting together. We also want them to be social towards each other. You can't be social when you're in front of a TV. And one of the licensing regulations here in the state of Arkansas says that children, infants and toddlers, cannot have any screen time in their child care facilities. Okay, if you're a preschooler, you can have a limited amount of screen time. That includes computers, iPads, phones, anything. They're very limited. I think it's about an hour a day of screen time that they can have, but no more. It's also important that we talk with parents about programming that is important, that is appropriate for the children. Some television programs are not appropriate for children to watch. And some programs are wonderful. Most of your programs you have on PBS, that Sesame Street, there's Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, The Magic School Bus, and many others that are appropriate, and they also teach things to the children. These are all great. Also, video games. There's a lot of video games out there that are very, very, very inappropriate for very young children. And so making sure that, as parents are coming into your program, that you talk to the parents about programs that are appropriate or inappropriate, because some parents just do not know that a child should not be playing war games at the age of 3 and killing people. That's not appropriate for that age, because children at this age don't know the difference between reality and make-believe. And so that's something, and they should also limit the time they have on screen time or TV time in the home, because they need to be interacting with their children, not just putting them in front of a TV. That happens so often, and it's just very, very, very sad that that happens. So limit computers. Also make sure that the games and the programs you have on your computers in the preschool classroom and your classrooms are appropriate. And make sure that they may even include social, where you have 2 children at the computer that they're sharing and working together, where it's not just sitting and clicking, but they're actually talking about what is on that screen. One of the last things they talk about in this chapter is children with disabilities. Basically, and I'm going to talk more about this with y'all. I have a brochure I'm going to bring into class next week. But basically, children who have disabilities by law have to be integrated into the classroom, and they also have to receive free, appropriate public education. It is the law that we make sure our environments are set up for children with disabilities. And in your chapter on page 61, they go through and give you a chart of children that have different types of disabilities. And it talks about learning disabilities there and what we should do with children. Also, children should be included into the regular classroom as much as possible. Now, we don't have to worry about this so much in preschool, because we include those children and everything. Now, when they get to elementary, it's a little bit different. But in preschool, everybody is included in every classroom environment, and they're not excluded. If you are excluding a child, then you are breaking the IEP, and that can be breaking the law, and that can lead to a lawsuit. So you have to make sure at all times that you are following the IEP, the Individualized Education Plan, or the IFSP, Individualized Family Service Plan. It depends on what type of preschooler program the child is in, which plan will be used, and that is, once it's written and signed, it is law. As you have questions over Chapter 4, please let me know.